Ads schmads. If you don't want ads, that's okay. Choose the Dave McWilliams Plus option on Apple Podcasts. And hey presto, no ads.
To understand the economy, you have to understand human nature.
This podcast is powered by Acast.
How are you doing there? It is time for the podcast. And at this time, John, this time of the year, we're going to talk about airports, because this time of the year, particularly Dublin Airport, but most airports are just jammed and rammed and full of people. And I'm going to tell you what airports tell you about economics, right? But I'm also going to tell you, I've always thought that airports, particularly now, when a couple of months ago, remember I was in the States and I was in Grand Central Station and I was looking around at this monumental piece of architecture, kind of a testament to American ambition, right? What train stations were to the early 20th century, airports are to the early 21st century.
Yeah.
They are the most democratic place in society. And the reason is everyone flies, right?
Yeah.
And if you sit in Dublin Airport and you just have a coffee and you just watch the world go by, you see a massively diverse image of the country.
Yeah.
In a way in which you don't see on other public transports. What I'm saying is all classes go through the airport as well.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Which they don't, not really on public, not buses in the same way, right?
But airports are kind of exciting places. Do you remember, sorry, it was just as you're talking there, I was thinking back, you know when you did your kind of communion or confirmation or your birthday as a treat? My mother used to drive us out to the airport.
Oh, absolutely.
Just to have a look at the planes, because it was such an alien thing. I wasn't on a plane until I was 20.
I tell you, I was the very first plane I was on. I have to tell you. By the way, listener, don't worry. We're not going to get sidetracked. We are going to talk about the import of airports on society and economics. What airports tell you about economics? But I went to Lourdes with my mother. I swear to Jesus, I was about 9, right?
Yeah.
And I went to Lourdes with my mother and my granny on a pilgrim plane from Dublin to France. And I got on the plane and I was so excited.
Yeah.
And the air hostesses came on, and they were only hostesses then.
Yeah.
And they were like, in the unlikely event of cabin pressure, blah, blah, blah. But then about 2 minutes after, the air hostesses did their thing.
Yeah.
A holy biddy, got hold of the microphone. Hail Mary, full of grace, the rosary, right? Holy Mary, right? Decade of the rosary, all the way over, right? So,
and that's about what, two and a half
hour flight.
Yeah.
Holy Joes, right? So about 5 years later, I'm on my second flight.
To Lourdes?
No, to Germany. Dalkey United football trip, right?
The antithesis
of the Lourdes trip, right? And my dad, who's the manager of the under-13s, Dalkey United, is sitting beside me. And the plane's about to take off, and I say to my dad, "Where are all the nuns?" I thought planes came with nuns.
And he gave you a clipper in the ear.
He said, "What nuns? What do you mean, nuns?" I said, "The nuns who do the praying on the plane." Because that's what I thought. I thought just planes were full of nuns. And do you know who was sitting beside us on that Dalkey United trip?
Who?
Pele.
No way.
The real Pele. I got his autograph about 8,000 times, the poor man, right?
Was he playing up front for Dalkey United?
He was playing up for, no, Paul McGrath was playing for Dalkey United.
Well, of course, yeah.
Speaking of our own Black Pearl, the Black Pearl of Inchicore was playing for Dalkey United. He was in the senior team, we were in the junior team.
Yeah.
But Pele was on the flight. Could you imagine anything more exciting?
But what was he doing? Why?
Pele was on a sort of a UNICEF trip to Ireland or something. And he's going to Germany. He's a round European trip, doing something for Save the This or that or whatever. And the poor lad was mobbed by all these kids.
Wow.
So,
that's a thrill.
So no nuns.
Yeah.
But maybe the best player who ever played football.
Have you still got his autograph?
I think I do, actually. I think I
you should dig that out.
I will dig it up and we put it actually up on Twitter. Yeah. Pele's autograph. Anyway, let's go back to airports, right? Because right now, loads and loads of people coming home. About 20 years ago, it used to be full of Irish people coming home around this time of year. Now it's full of immigrants going either for Christmas or coming back. I mean, basically, it shows you who's living in the country.
Yeah.
So it's an amazing snapshot of the society. And then when you look at the data, what you find is something amazing, which is the Dublin Airport shows you the truly global nature of Irish society and the Irish economy. And there is no other city of 1.5 million people that is as well connected as Dublin. And that is the fascinating thing. The connections are unbelievable.
Yeah.
And fascinatingly, and this is the key, for small open economies, connectivity is crucial. And nothing so underscores the connectivity of Ireland, the international nature of Ireland, and the globalized nature of Ireland than the airport. And I suppose the reason I want to do this podcast today, John, is a lot of people are looking forward to 2025.
Yeah.
They're worried about globalization. They're worried about multinationals. They're worried about Donald Trump. They're worried about this, that, and the other. And what I'm saying is, let's just go to the airport and see what the airport tells us. Because even if the world is heading towards protectionism, and it may well be, the diversity of the airport in Dublin is a sign of strength, not weakness, because it explains to us how enmeshed we are in the global economy. And I think better than any official statistic, if you're looking at Ireland, right? And you know the way people say, how's Ireland doing?
Yeah.
I think just go to the airport and look around, because it gives you this instant revelation of who is traveling, where and how.
And the volumes of people.
The volumes.
Are these mostly business people, holiday makers? Like, who are the main?
Well, the whole thing is that travel is trade, right? Let's just think. And Dublin Airport is distinguished not just by the volume of passengers, John, but by the very destinations and the numerous carriers. So it's not just tourism, right? So, of course, Ryanair is the biggest airline.
Yeah.
763 takeoffs a week by Ryanair.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Followed by Aer Lingus, right? But of course, think about the States, right? You've got Delta, United, American, and JetBlue all operating. There are 50 transatlantic flights a week, which shows you an unbelievable connection with North America, right? But
I believe there's now a direct flight to Nashville.
you're going to be on it.
Which is just
The Johnny Cash of podcasting. It's going to be there.
But it's not a bizarre place to fly direct to. I wouldn't have thought there'd be so much.
No.
Are people just going to gigs, or what are they doing?
I have no idea. Anybody listening who is on the way to Nashville or has come back from Nashville can explain to us.
They're going to see both kinds of music, country and Western.
Exactly. But park that. Think about Europe. There is no other small country in Europe as connected with the US. But look at, there are 28 flights a week from Lufthansa alone to Frankfurt as a business hub. KLM operates 21
So
flights.
they're all corporate-y ones then?
All corporate, yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of corporate, but also a lot of connections. So if you're flying to further Eastern Europe, right? If you're going further east, Frankfurt is always a very, very good connection, as to is Amsterdam, right? There's 21 flights by KLM alone to Amsterdam, right? British Airways runs 10 flights a day to London Heathrow and London City.
Yeah.
And London Dublin is the third most busy airline route in the world.
Is it?
Which is a phenomenal thing, right?
Yeah.
So it shows you this effervescence in the economy. And this is what I'm trying to say, is that airports capture something that statistics don't. It's real people.
Yeah.
But also you think, okay, that's Europe and Ireland and Britain, whatever. Qatar, Emirates, there are 14 flights weekly to the Middle East. And they're, of course, bringing people to Dubai, people to Saudi Arabia, but also Dubai is a hub as well for people going on to Australia and going on to Asia. So this is the way in which we are connected. And of course, we are connected with long-haul flights to the west coast of America,
Yeah.
to San Francisco and to LA, direct flights. I mean, very few other European countries have anything like this coverage.
So is that as a result of demand?
Yeah, well, I mean, I presume like most...
Or does it work the other way around?
It's always a very, very big decision to put on a new scheduled flight by a big airline to any place.
Yeah.
But there's also another interesting thing, which is the Ryanair model, is build it and they will come. So it wasn't demand driven. What Ryanair did was they created the supply, and the supply created its own demand. There's a great example of a place called Osijek in Croatia.
Yeah.
And of course, then there are the sun holidays. There's Malaga, Alicante, Tenerife, Faro. Ryanair alone operates 234 weekly flights to those airports, to European sun destinations. It's kind of Mental,
It's
right?
full of golf clubs, I'd say.
It's full of golf clubs and all sorts of carry on. But I mean, again, I come back to the idea, right? If you want to capture the vibrancy, the diversity, the cosmopolitan nature of a country, look at the airports.
So you know the way you talk about when Ireland opened up in the early 90s?
Yes.
So what's the correlation then between the growth of airline traffic in and out of Dublin over time since the 90s?
Yeah, well, this is a great leading indicator of what has happened to the society. I always use the society, not just the economy, because yes, the economy is the engine, but it's the engine of the society,
Yeah.
right? So what you're just seeing is unbelievable change in where people are going, who they are, how they're traveling, etc., etc. Now,
Yeah.
I'll give you a good example. So Ireland is a country of, let's say, 5 million odd people, right? The Republic of Ireland, right? Scotland is also a country of about 5 million people. If you compare Scottish airports to Dublin Airport, you get an absolutely brilliant insight into the difference in the economy. So let's compare it to either Glasgow or Edinburgh, right? Similarly sized. In Glasgow, what you see is that the vast majority of flights are EasyJet going to Alicante or Malaga,
Yeah,
right? They're
yeah, yeah.
not going to
The
business
holiday
centers.
kind
They're
of
holidays.
flights,
They're
yeah.
cheap holiday flights. They are not business flights. There are no connections between, for example, Glasgow and your New Yorks and your Washingtons or some of the big capital cities in Europe because they're just not going. It's people going on their holidays to
Yeah,
sun
yeah.
destination. Same thing, for example, for Edinburgh, right? The most frequently departed route from Edinburgh is to Dublin.
Really?
Every single week, 62 flights go to Dublin, 7% of their total departures, right?
Wow.
So what
That's
you
incredible.
see is that Scotland isn't really on the international commercial grid. Or it's not that it's not on the grid, it's not on the grid enough. And the best way to see that is to look at who's flying from Scotland to where, right? I'll give you another example. You take Oslo,
Yeah.
capital of Norway. It's only connected to 3 US destinations. We are connected to 20. So
Wow.
it shows you the Americanization of Irish
Yeah.
commerce and therefore of Irish society. And this is what I keep coming back to. I mean, yes, we are highly dependent on America, but this is a far better position than not being dependent on them at all. This is a far better position than not having
Yeah.
any footprint in the United States. And what it shows you is that the airport is essential to the economic development of the country.
So in that case, for any emerging economy, if a government ploughed investment into an airport to try to create some sort of a hub and more capacity, well, then that's going to be a major factor in economic development of that place.
You absolutely should be. For example, years ago, I flew in Africa and Addis Ababa has become a hub in Ethiopia.
Yeah.
But again, it's a combination of geography. You have to be in the right place,
Yeah.
right? And population dynamics. You have to have a huge population. Whereas Ireland has done it without. So the biggest hub in Europe should be Switzerland, somewhere like that in the middle, where you'd imagine not out in the west,
yeah.
right? So it's a reflection of the way in which the economy has developed. But I think you're right. It is inconceivable in a world of globalization and in a world of free trade or even regional trade that a country can actually develop without a serious airline transport system. And that is amazing that Ireland has that now. And again, what I say is like, we are worried about the economy. We are worried about the future. We are worried about what's going to happen. However, at the moment, what you're looking at is an unbelievably plugged in economy and a commercial footprint that is truly global. That's the key.
Yeah. So that's passengers. But like, what's the air freight then in Dublin? Because I mean, that is the physical goods in and out, not just the people.
Well, again, it's very interesting. If you contrast Ireland with other countries, what has happened to Ireland over the last couple of years is the economy has become very light.
Yeah.
So I know it's hard to imagine, but imagine a heavy economy, an economy that exports, for example, oil.
Yeah.
Oil is incredibly heavy. Crude oil is heavy. You've got to put it in massive tankers
Yeah.
and you've got to ship it around the world. If you're exporting chips, microchips,
Yeah.
and biomedical little devices and these sort of things, again, air traffic is much, much more a reflection of what's going on. which is freight
Gotcha.
traffic.
Okay.
So it's a very interesting thing of looking at the difference between heavy economies and light economies. So heavy economies are exporting in the main commodities, things that are made out of steel as well, right? So Germany would be a very heavy
Yeah.
industrial sector because it's making things that are heavy, whereas Ireland is very, very light because
Yeah.
we don't make any heavy industrial things. So again, if you look at the figures, what you see is the airports capturing not just passenger traffic, but also this idea of the light economy. And again, at the moment, and it is a case of touch wood, if all these companies remain here, this is a very, very positive thing. Like even the port channel, I'll give you a figure, right? Think about a country like Norway. Even as an exporter, it doesn't come anywhere close to Ireland. So look at Dublin Port's figures. Dublin Port carries 37 million gross tons of freight every year. Oslo Port does 6 million.
Wow.
Right?
I'm really surprised
So-
at that. I would have thought it'd be the other way around.
It's six times more dynamic, despite the fact that our populations are broadly the same and they have this big oil sector.
Yeah.
But I mean, what they have is the oil sector dominates everything
Yeah.
because the oil sector is the one that generates all their
Yeah.
income.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what we are doing, and this is really crucial, maybe we'll talk about in part 2, John, is we have managed to become more diverse. And the reason being connected is important for economic growth is connectivity reveals diversity, meaning the amount of different things a country does with different people. That's the idea.
Well, okay, diversity. Let's come back to that after a bit of this.
Cool.
So Dublin Airport is a major hub, but as you're saying that it reflects so much about the Irish economy, the Irish society, but particularly in terms of diversity.
Yeah. Well, diversity is the key. Okay, so we're going to get in the famine, monoculture, and economic vibrancy. So we've
Take me on that journey. Tell us about the famine. How does that fit
How
into
does
the airport?
Okay, the famine and Dublin Airport. Don't say you don't get eclectic takes on this particular podcast. Right. Famine is the following. What was the single most problematic, apart from people dying and starving, right, of the famine
Yeah.
was what they call in biology monoculturalism.
Yes.
So a society that was far too dependent on one culture, the potato. And the problem with monoculturalism in biology is when you become over dependent on that, you go down what the economists would call the Malthusian trap. You become too dependent on one commodity. And if that commodity fails, so if the potato fails,
Yeah.
the implications and the ramifications are absolutely disastrous because you have no alternative.
This is the major problem with modern farming in general is that massive swathes of land given over to one crop.
To one crop. So
Yeah.
so think about another way in the podcast, I always use biology more than physics to explain economics. So think
Yeah.
about that, right?
You weren't
So-
clever enough for physics.
I wasn't too, couldn't do the hard sums, couldn't do the maths. Right? Yeah, exactly. Biology was always the kind of softy. This kind of science for Egypts. So here we are in the biology class. Now, think about the same thing in economics. If the country is over dependent on one industry, then you have a serious problem if that industry fails. So the key to a successful, globalized, small society is to try and achieve diversity. So try and achieve 20 industries or 10 industries that are unrelated to each other
Yeah.
in such a way that if one of them goes under, or if one of them goes through tough times, or if one of them is outflanked by competition from elsewhere, you will have...
Or new innovations.
Or new innovations.
Yeah.
You can at least say, well, we've got 9 other industries, right? So, for example, if you look at, finance is different to pharma, and pharma is different to construction, and construction is different to biomedics, and it's different to tech, and then tech is different to agriculture and tourism, and so on, and banking and finance, and all those sort of things, right? So what you have are education. What you have are a number of industries, and those industries are plugged into the global economy. So if one goes, you're not absolutely screwed.
Yeah.
Whereas if you depend on one industry, we mentioned the Norwegians,
Yeah.
right? What are they going to do when oil runs out? It's a long time away, but they've got to figure out
Yeah.
other things. So the question is,
It's like having
does-
a backup engine on a plane just to bring it back to the airport.
Yeah, well, exactly. And as somebody who's afraid of flying, John, thank you very much for explaining that to me. Right.
We've lost engine number 2. It's okay, we got 2 others.
We got 2 others, right? So it's the same idea, right?
Yeah.
So the great thing about having a multi-dimensional airport, it suggests a multi-dimensional economy, right? That's the first thing.
Yeah.
So that's cool. So a diverse region is a resilient region. And that, I suppose, is for listeners to kind of reinforce, if you're worried about the future, there's a lot of good things going on here. And again, if you look at, for example, Saudi Arabia, it's entirely dependent on one thing,
Yeah.
oil. If you look at many of those petrostates, it's just oil. That's all they have. Lots and lots of regions, for example, in the north of England or in the West Midlands of England, they had the car industry. When that went south, they had nothing else to replace it.
Yeah.
So what the IDA has done, either by design or luck or whatever, even if the companies are owned by the Yanks, it is still a highly diverse economy.
I always thought that was the great failing and short-sightedness of Thatcher. Closed down all those industries, but replaced them with nothing.
Well, it takes a long time. In a laboratory, you can run economic experiments and say, yeah, if we close down this will open up. This is classic free market idea, the price will fall. That's not how the world works. And also, sometimes other countries are just too far ahead of you.
Yeah.
So the Japanese are too far ahead in certain areas, the Chinese in certain areas, the Germans in certain areas in the past, the Americans, etc. So we have put all our eggs, ironically, not in the diversity basket, but in the diplomatic basket, which is we're highly dependent on decisions taken at the very top in the United States.
Right.
And
Yeah.
that is our weakness, right?
Yeah.
But also, you mentioned innovation.
Yeah.
The more diverse the society, the more innovation you have. And the reason's the following, right? Diverse economies have more interaction, they have more people, they have more networks, there's capital moving in and out, there's more ideas, there's more products, there's more services, right? This, in and of itself, is the sort of vibrant petri dish to talk about experiments,
Yeah.
John, and back to biology, where innovations come from.
I just want to let you know, listeners, Mac is now wearing a white coat.
A white coat, I've got a little petri dish, a white coat, exactly, and a little bacterial
And those
thing.
goggles.
The goggles, right? But what I'm talking about here is that new ideas and new products are usually fashioned out of adjacent products that already
Yes.
exist,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And this is a really critical thing to get our heads around. So that, for example, the PC, the personal computer, led to lots of innovation in microchips. How do you make it smaller? How do you make it faster? How do you make it quicker?
Yeah.
That then was the hardware necessary for mobile phones. Mobile phones, therefore, were the software that prompted smartphones. Smartphones, in and of themselves, created an adjacent product called social media, which would never have happened if it
yes,
hadn't
true.
been for smartphones, which in and of itself has threatened mainstream media, so much so that journalism is now dying and it's been replaced by TikTok, right? All these extraordinary...
And democracy.
And democracy. We'll come back to that. We're actually going to have a podcast on that soon,
Right.
John, on the message and marshalling the message. But all these things are adjacent to each other. They don't seem to be, but they are. And that's how innovation happens. And therefore the country or the region that happens to be at least present in a small bit in all these things wins.
Yeah.
And of course, innovation comes from this mad machine between our ears called the human brain. And it also comes from borrowing. So if you divide the world into copycats and geniuses, who do you think survives?
Well, the copycats.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So if you have a genius who was brilliant but is asocial, right?
Yeah.
As many geniuses are, they're not great at the talking business.
Yeah.
right?
Well,
Okay.
depends. Yeah.
And you have a whole load of copycats who aren't geniuses, but they're very good at copying.
Yeah.
The innovation that the genius comes up with are much more likely to be used in a myriad of ways by the copycats
Yeah.
than by the rather asocial geniuses.
Yeah. A la China.
Out of China. Do it again. Do your Trump thing. Do your China.
China.
Okay, right. So what we have is the more people, the more ideas, the more interactions, the more relationships, the more talk, the more chatter, the more social we are, the more likely are that innovations become transferred person to person, from company to company. And that's what creates the innovative society.
Yeah.
It's not the lone genius, it's the copycats. That's why I always, in the way in school, do you remember in school, fellas would put their hand around their copy? Do you remember those fellas?
Yeah.
Right? You can't look.
That
right?
was you, actually.
Hey, how much of your record did I do? How much of your record over the years did I do?
It wasn't the biology stuff.
There were legions of your records. Psalms, Irish, Tishel Ginnaduct, French, fucking grammar, the whole thing.
In fairness, you did the Irish, all right.
I did the Irish, yeah. I swear to God, if I could only get paid now for all the amount of John's Ecker I did over the years, right? Michael, when you do me Ecker.
I got you the girls, though.
That's very true. Anyway, so let us end here, John. What I'm saying is the airport is this beautiful 1970s Polaroid snapshot of the vibrancy of the society. And it's really critical, and it's very democratic, and it shows you where the society is going, not just physically,
Yeah.
but
But
where
then-
we're going innovatively.
Well, something I mentioned earlier then is this idea of the cap.
Oh, disastrous. Stupid.
Well, it seems to be, if that diversity and that volume and that amount of traffic and trade that's coming through Dublin Airport, if you put a cap on it, and okay, fair enough, it's about reducing our carbon emissions and all the rest, and that's fair enough. But you're also capping our economic development.
I think what's going on here, John, is a typical Irish thing, right? Carbon emissions, great.
Yeah.
What is actually going on here is local grubby politics dressed up as global concerns, right?
Really?
Basically, what you have is people in North Dublin, and apologies in advance, if you buy a house beside an airport, what are you going to get? Noise. It's an airport, right? It's like we live beside the sea, right? We're going to get the sea. You can't say, oh, I don't like the sea.
Yeah.
Oh, the wind coming off the sea, it's brutal, right? Basically, what you have is
But if the volume is going up, I mean, volume
has to,
both in terms of planes, number of planes, but also...
but you live beside an airport. Like, don't say, oh, I bought a house beside an airport and now I'm going to complain about the airport, right? So what we see is local politics, John. I think this is what I think is going on.
Yeah.
It's happening, which is basically responding to residents' concerns, is masking local concerns about getting elected. And again, we're back to this idea of local residents concerned about property values, dressing it up as saving polar bears, right?
But Mac, in fairness, I think you're going to get a bit of incoming for that. But anyway, I mean...
Do you remember the RAF had this expression, you only take the flak if you're over the target?
Yeah.
The target is, that's what I think.
Yeah.
But go on.
No, but I think I was trying to get my head around the cap for all the things you said prior to this about diversity and economic growth and being a source of economic growth. But I also feel that, okay, if there is an issue with the volume of planes coming in and traffic and all the rest, that, and in fairness, we don't have a tram to go out to the airport. I mean, we're missing
Back
that.
to local politics again.
Yeah, exactly.
Local politics again.
But why aren't we spreading the load around the country? Shannon was a hub back in its day, and it's sitting there, and you could do a shuttle from Dublin, from Cork, from Galway to Shannon.
No, you could, or Cork Airport itself.
Yeah.
But Cork Airport is really very small. I think it's
Or Knock.
well, exactly. What was his
With
name?
all your nuns.
Monsignor Horan.
Yeah.
Monsignor Horan and Charlie High.
Yeah.
Such an extraordinary duet. My God almighty. Dancing with the Stars. I can imagine it just now. Cork Airport, I think, traffic about 3 million people a year.
Right.
Shannon, about 2 million. These are very...
It just seems like a waste.
They're very underutilized.
Yeah.
There's no doubt that Ireland has become eastern seaboard centric. And no matter what happens in the north, if something happens the next time, it's going to be even more so because Belfast is a huge city.
Yeah.
It's like
Yeah.
Belfast has 500,000 people up there, right? So it'll be very eastern. So I think you're absolutely right. If we can see that lots and lots of people from the west of Ireland or from Munster are actually driving to Dublin or getting buses. And I think it is because, again, another thing if you get off a flight in Dublin Airport, the amount of buses going
Yeah, the blue
all
buses,
over.
yeah.
Buses going all over the country. So yeah, no, I think you're right. I think that part of the movement of the cap would be to try and send people, passengers and freight, to Shannon and our Cork.
Yeah.
There's no doubt of that. But again, as long as it doesn't take away from the evolutionary idea here,
Precisely.
that basically people want to come into this city and this is the hub of Ireland and it's from here you go elsewhere. But I think you're right. I mean, the general idea of the cap would seem to me to be virtuous, sound good, but don't underestimate the extraordinary role of the airport in the economic development and social development of the country. And what I just say to listeners is, next time you want to assess, because another way, John, you know,
Yeah.
you're always wanting to assess how the economy's going.
Yes,
You're
indeed.
going down for a pint, say, oh, how's the economy? But rather than wait from the ESRI or the government to give you statistics, just go into Dublin Airport when you're waiting for a flight and look at the screen, look at the board,
Yeah.
and look at the hundreds and hundreds of destinations. And that, more than anything else, will give you a sense of where the Irish economy has come from and is going to.
Departures and arrivals.
Departures and arrivals. There you go.